So much of Western occultism and magic deals with confronting horror, confronting demons, both external and internal, confronting our fears. Western occultism owes a lot to Jewish mysticism, so I wanted to know what Jewish texts say about fear.
That's the essence of horror, the fact that horror is divine and related to the one being that should protect you.
This is Ilaria Briata. She's a scholar of Jewish studies. For her postdoctorate, she's looking into how Jewish texts, they deal with the concept of fear. She's giving a Morbid Anatomy talk later today. The lecture's called A Brief History of the Jewish Taste for Horror, and she'll be discussing notorious, spooky characters in Jewish stories.
It seems like the entire Old Testament is a testament to fear.
You're afraid of everything because you're nothing. And it's God that's it's everything. Acknowledging this huge gap between you and God. Understanding that God is something that is completely different from you, and you cannot know Him. From this lack of knowledge, maybe also stems fear.
To watch the full 89-minute interview, where Ilaria and I go in depth into our postdoctorate research, become a member at patreon.com/witchesandwine.
Western culture, we think about horror. We, of course, think about Gothic literature and Stephen King, for instance, Clive Barker as horror.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
I think that that's not the way to approach the question of horror in Jewish culture. For instance, now I'm working on a book that is called Shevet Musar, that means the rod of chastisement. So it has a very strict and very serious title. And this book was written in Hebrew originally in 1712 in Izmir. So in the Ottoman Empire, in nowadays Turkey. This text became very, very famous. So what I'm interested in is to understand from this text how we can perceive fear. So both in the way that these texts trigger fear in the reader, so with images of hell, demons, and also bodily gore and these kind of things, but also in the way that the texts themselves describe fear and speak about fear. And this latter point is what actually made me start this research in Jewish horror, Shevet Musar. We have a lot of description of how fear works, because for the author writing this book, fear is a very important instrument for education and for spiritual enlightenment, and in a very physical way, in the sense that he has very physical description of fear, like he speaks of how you feel like needles in your skin, and you have the feeling that your vertebrae, your backbone detach, and they are very relatable. That's how our body works. If we experience fear, and especially if we trigger in ourselves fear, we are somehow distracted from sinful thoughts and from evil inclination and any temptation we may have of not behaving well. It's just thinking about something scary, and so scare yourself, so that your heart will somehow be distracted and just to think about the fear and have this very physical feeling that disrupt the, let's say, the conscience from it's a sinful train of thoughts. He doesn't try to explain why evil is called evil and why you should not do it. Evil is always around and inside the people. And it's not something that you can that you can fight and at some point you just overcome it and now you're a good person. No, evil is also always as an external temptation, but also as something part of the soul of man is always present, and you have to fight it all the time while you're alive. And one of the tricks is that of scaring yourself. So using fear, using horror as an instrument for ethical living.
So the book, it actually has like practical sort of like, if you're feeling like you're encountering evil, think of this specific scenario, like of hell or something like that.
Yeah, you find these images, and one, it's not very scary, but it's funny, and it says that if you're feeling that you're falling into temptation of any kind, that would be eating something that is not kosher, or seeing or having a sexual desire for a woman that is not your wife, anything. If you're feeling that you're encountering evil, let's just think about a very big man that is about to punish you.
This is almost as if somebody were to say, if you're about to cheat on your girlfriend, here's a YouTube playlist of like really horrible, like bloody movies to watch to scare you, so that instead of cheating on your girlfriend, you'll just feel scared. Is that sort of a good analogy?
Exactly. That's exactly the way, one of the, I mean, it's not the only system, educational system that we find in this book, but it's a very important one. We find very different description of hell throughout Jewish literature, and they don't start in the Bible. For instance, we don't have hell in the Bible. We have something similar that is Sheol, and it's more like similar to a Greek Latin afterlife. In Christianity, it's very clear how the hell looks like, because, but it's simply because Christianity had, to a higher degree than Judaism, Orthodox ideology. So Orthodox in the sense that it's the common, it's established and common to everyone. Judaism never experienced something like orthodoxy. So there were always different opinions, different currents, different trends. You have, you can find a whole trend of literature in Hebrew that is inspired by Dante and the Commedia and the Inferno. So it's coming from the Jewish world, it's developing Christianity, and then Christianity influenced Jewish culture again. And these taking hints from external cultures and then reworking them, it's really how every culture works. So it's not like saying that the Jews just copied the Christian on the question of hell. The Judaism for many centuries had a belief in metempsychosis, so in reincarnation, and that's something that kind to be important also for the question of horror, because that's how the book, so the typical Jewish demon is made. The Bukim, so these demons that possess people are very different from the demons that possess people, like in The Exorcist or in any account of Christian possession, because they are not only supernatural or superhuman and let's say entities that are not human but are not divine. They are something very different from man, but they are the souls of men themselves.
The way that Lilith became a demon, she was human to begin with. She said God's name, you weren't supposed to say it, and then poof, she got wings, and then she like became a demon, the first demon. The demons don't necessarily have to be created by Satan. They could be a woman. They could be a woman who says, I'm not going to do missionary position during sex. And then she turns into a demon, like one of the most feared demons.
18th century, let's say, were also in the Christian world, there was a very cultural boost of all the possession issue, like, for instance, the famous story of the demons of Loudun in France. It's one of the most famous historical cases of possession and exorcism in Christianity. The movie by Ken Russell's The Devils is based on...
You are unrepentant heretics! There is no act more vile!
And at the same period, we experience something similar in Jewish culture. In a different area, there are really a lot of accounts of this possession and of rabbis exorcising people. And that was a real issue. But here we find the very basic conceptual difference. That is that the Christian possession is a case where a supernatural evil being take possession of the body and soul of a person, while in Judaism we have the wandering soul of a deceased person taking possession of somebody.
One of the things that I heard was that after World War II, there was a subgenre of BDSM where it was a lot of like forbidden fantasies that some Jewish writers had of being dominated by Nazi SS officers. And I'm wondering, like, if part of the Jewish horror could also be the forbidden horrors of being turned on or being, I don't know, even interested or titillated by real life horrors that have happened in the community.
It's called Stalag literature, and I think that these publications are held in the National Library of Israel. They exist. I saw a few days ago, it was the birthday of Dario Argento, so like the myth of Italian horror movies. He was saying that he had a gift from nature. And I was expecting that he would say that he can direct beautiful movies. But instead, he said that the gift was the ability to speak with his dark side. And he was actually scared that at some point these strange thoughts would just overwhelm him and made him act in a strange way. But that's how, for instance, a good book or a good movie in the genre of horror come out, with the ability of someone to speak to his darker fantasies. As the author of Shevet Musar would say, that evil and dark things are always within, outside us and within us. And we cannot just overcome them or just silence them, but we have to address them. And one of the defining ideas of Judaism is the fact that God is one. And if God is one, everything comes from God, also evil. Horror is divine and somehow related to the one being that should protect you. This question of Ira is very compelling because it's a theological concept. So you have Ira Chet, which is the fear of committing a sin. So another time again, behaving as a good man because of you fear of the consequences of sin, but also Ira Adonai or Ira Hashem. So the fear of God, the awe of God. In Jewish theology, there is this strong conception of fear of God, the fear of sin. So it's something very religiously and theologically marked. This fear, yes, it's very conceptualized, and maybe it's, I think the word can be used for the description of like the thrills we feel when we see a slasher movie. but it's usually something very connected to the soul, but not to on the emotional side, more on the ideological side. And I think this could be a good starting point for understanding Jewish horror.